Hello everybody, Jacob Little, Chief Changemaker at About Time for Justice. I'd like to pay my respects to all First Nations mob, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to pay my respects to lived experience people in the room. This morning I was at Melbourne Remand Centre, and it's always sort of a bit triggering going back into them places for me. It's very hard, but yeah, also to them people that are still locked down at the moment. So when I was 17 years old, I committed a robbery of violence, and it landed me in Brisbane Boys Yard. Pretty hard time in my life. I remember sort of waking up in the watch house thinking, what is this place? I can always remember that smell of the watch house. Every time you go to that watch house, there's that same smell. So like a really strong, bleachy type of smell. You never forget it. When I was there, it was scary. There was people yelling out. I didn't know what to expect. There was like shared conjugal showers. There was probably like 3 or 4 other people in there, like fully grown men. I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, I remember getting on the prison bus, the prison van, and going to Brisbane Correctional Centre. So inside of Brisbane Correctional Centre, they housed 17-year-olds at that time. So they called it the Brisbane Boys Yard. Anyone under that was at the juvie, but it was weird because only 17-year-olds were housed in the Boys Yard section. Then when you turned 18, you would go to a men's jail. So while I was there, I suffered sexual abuse at the hands of a prison officer. He come into my cell more than once and sexually abused me. So it was a very hard time in my life. I was lost. I was a bit confused. I only just finished high school. I literally just finished high school, had been at schoolies, got charged, ended up in the watch house, ended up in jail. And I started sharing my story about going through institutional abuse about 6 years ago now. In this photo is me and my father. He's my business partner in this business, and we used our compensation money for going through institutional child abuse to start our organisation. So our mission is to help all survivors of institutional child abuse seek justice, start healing, while giving the voiceless their voices back. There have been so many survivors like myself who have tried to speak up about their abuse and nothing happened. I tried to speak up about my abuse, and the higher chief officer or whoever it was just brushed it under the carpet. My dad's abuse happened at his local primary school. He went down to the police station with his mum and dad, and all that happened to the perpetrator was he got fired. That was it. It changed my whole life. It changed our whole life. My dad being abused. We had kicked off our business, and I sort of had started studying just before we kicked off the business. I was at the University of Southern Queensland at that time. I'd done tertiary preparation course, so TPP, which I think is a really good university. That university in particular, because they help guys get education in jail. I think somebody said earlier about that, and Curtin University. So I really like them for what they do. But yeah, I sort of started progressing with my studies, and then I got into a Bachelor of Arts, and I started doing majoring in legal studies with the ambition to get into a Bachelor of Laws. I want to start up a law firm one day. That's my mission of studying. So halfway through, or so probably towards 3 or 4 units in, I decided that I wanted to switch over to a New South Wales-based university because I had mentors through my current organisation that were offered to mentor me to start my own practice and things like that. So I thought there's no point in doing all my education in Queensland because otherwise I'm going to have to go back to New South Wales and do more. And I already struggle with my university, so I was like, the less I can do, the better. Yeah. So I remember when I first started at the University in New England, it was different. It was a different setup. The university lecturers probably weren't as forthcoming to lived experience people. I literally say my whole life story in a short email to every one of my university lecturers and asked if they were prepared to meet up with me just to talk, just because I struggle and if they can offer me any support. At the University of Southern Queensland, they were awesome there, but at UNE there was a bit different. But still been a good university for me. So what education has meant to me as a formerly incarcerated person, it's really opened doors and got me into places where I wouldn't have been able to get into before. There's no way in the world I'd be sitting in a university lecture hall speaking about all this stuff without, I suppose, studying. So this lady on the left-hand side, Suzanne Rock, she's been a massive unofficial mentor to me through my whole university degree. So when I first started at University of Southern Queensland, someone said, "Hey, do you know who Susan Rock is?" And I was like, "No." They're like, "You need to talk to her." I was like, "Okay." And I think I'd done a podcast or something like that through the university, and that person told me about Susan. So I spoke with her, and she invited me to start meeting up with a group of lived experience people who had done time. And basically, we used to meet up every week and have like Zoom sessions. And she was so nice to me. And coming from that old lifestyle of being in jail, if someone was trying to do something nice for you, it's like they're trying to rip you off or rob you. I was like, what does this person want from me? For so long, I was just scratching my head, like, what does she want? I don't get it. And it sort of, she helped me to break down trust issues and realize that there are good people out there that can help you. And, in my university groups and all the other people around me, like, they're very supportive. I remember I was sitting at a conference in Sydney. I think Dwayne was there. I think he was both there. And we were talking about, people want to see me win. They want to see me get into my university degree. I didn't even realise that, the other lived experience people were sort of right behind me as well. Sounds silly to say, right? But it was good to hear it from their mouth. It gave me a lot of encouragement. So, yeah. Well, also, with outside of networking with lived experience people, it's taught me other skills and being able to get in front of other people as well through my business. So my business, About Time for Justice, and my education has changed my trajectory and my intergenerational incarceration, intergenerational institutional abuse. Just to paint a picture for you, for me and my family, my father's two brothers, they both went to university. My father's mum and dad, they were just normal people. My pop was a builder. My nan was stay-at-home nan. She was done a bit of receptionist. So there was nothing that went wrong in our family. And so my dad was sexually abused. My two uncles weren't. Both of my uncles went on to study at university. One of them fellas had two kids, and both of them went on to university. I grew up visiting jails, having jail phone calls. My mates were in jail. Going to jail for me become normal as I grew up in with a lot of domestic violence, a lot of drinking. It was just normalised. Like heaps of the kids in my street where I lived, they were going and visiting their parents in jail, or they would be talking about their brother doing a job per se, and it just becomes so normalised to me when I got to that age. And now that I sort of started working on myself and started recognising through counselling and things like that, the way that I thought, and also through university, it's really opened my eyes up to what is actually out there, learning things, reading through different cases. So it's been great. I love studying at university. I only study 1 unit per trimester. There's some maniacs out there doing 4 and working full time. Anyone who done that? God bless. Yeah, so I just wanted to, if anyone does want to connect with me after this event, obviously I'll be here to have a talk. But if you did want to contact me later, yeah, all our social medias are there. And yeah, some things that I heard in the room today were really, really good. And what you said about Russell, that person done a lot for me in my life. And them stories are so important to share. Without his story, I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. And I have a lot of people reaching out to me now. I used to be also a bikie and in gangs. And a lot of people to me now are reaching out to me saying, hey, how do I change my life? I want to go to university. How do I do it? Or there's people that are sort of just started to do it. So there's a big community of lived experience people, and there's a massive network. When I go into the prisons, I tell all the guys, I'm like, listen, when you want to get out, there's a big community of us. I tell them about the Puzzle Reintegration Conference, and people get really excited about it. You know, I spoke to a guy today, he didn't even know how to spell his middle name. I'm not joking. It's pretty sad, isn't it? Like, the level of education in jails, it's pretty sad to see. But it's exciting, all the stuff that's happening within the lived experience community and being able to be a part of it. It's awesome. So yeah, thanks for coming down today, everyone. Appreciate you all. Yeah. Thank you.
I think when you were saying, Jacob, about the reintegration puzzle conference, and that we'd been connected for a while before,
Yeah.
and that was the first time we got to see each other in person.
Mm.
But last year, when Justice Reform Initiative held the reintegration puzzle conference, that was run through Deakin University, and last July was our first go at running it, and we'll run it again next year in Alice Springs, right, in Northern Territory. It's going to be amazing. But last year we had the most amount of lived experience presenters in the history of the conference. And it was so incredible to watch people who I'd been talking to on the phone, who had been submitting all of their abstracts, and they'd worked so hard on their presentations and got up there at a conference, at a professional conference that's full of academics and practitioners who are working in the criminal justice space, to get up there and share their expertise. So it wasn't just people sharing stories of their life and how they wound up in prison. It was people sharing the most incredible, knowledgeable insights on how to change the system and how to do things better. So it was just, if you ever get a chance to go to a reintegration puzzle conference, I can highly recommend it. It's one of those conferences where over the couple of days your cup gets filled up.
Yeah,
right?
that's awesome.
It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was the only opportunity in Australia that we have, because normally people with lived experience, we just stumble across each other, right, by accident. So it's the only sort of formalized way to really get together.
And next year it's in Alice Springs, which I think is a great location given the.
It'd be nice to escape the winter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was like a really great segue to this kind of idea of bringing the lived experience expertise into higher education, the academy, and I think the work of Incarceration Nations Network is led by these lived experience voices. But there's often a disjuncture between, yes, we want you, but on our terms, when we need you, without pay, when it's convenient for us. And I think we've all experienced that, all of us lived experience people here. But kind of to ask you this kind of real question, like, how do we move forward, do you think? What are some of the things? I know that Emma's going to talk about allyship and what that could mean, but for you, Tina and Jacob, those barriers are clearly problematic. And how can we overcome them, do you think?
To university, like to be like just being able to participate
without kind of needing the barriers and checks, and how do we embed it in such a way that it's and when you reflect back on this idea of lived experience, when Charlton in the disability rights movement said nothing about us without it, this idea of we should be part of the conversation, and the conversation is on our terms, for us, for the community. And now you and I, Lorana, have said the article that it should be led for us by us. And we're moving towards this kind of idea that these conversations should be led by us.
Yeah, but we're still having to hustle.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Still freaking the hustle all the time. Like, I just want a full-time job. Like, I'm 51. I'm tired of hustling. I just want a full-time gig where I can be paid what I'm worth and not have to be constantly balancing 5 different projects in order to make up a full-time wage. Like, that would be great.
To be fair, that's partly academia.
We're doing career path.
That's right. I work in a justice reform organisation as well as academia. But I'm just saying, I don't know anyone that has a full-time job yet doing exactly.
Yeah, it's a very insecure.
Yeah.
And how do we change that? How do we change the conversation? Do you have any thoughts, Jacob? How do we go from just kind of these casual workforce or fly in and out workforce that comes in and asks to do these kind of conversations, and then we want a full-time job? Sorry, there's no budget for that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I know there's other fellas out there that have spoken just about what you've spoken about too. Just sort of trying to get back into it. But I suppose from when you're on the inside too, when you're in jail, when I was in jail and lots of guys in jail don't even really understand what the education programs are. I feel like if you don't go down to the education block, you don't know what it is. Like if there was that message getting pushed into the actual units themselves rather than you take that big scary step then walking down to the education unit by yourself and having to sort of get in there. I feel like if there was more education in the actual units themselves, people might want to start asking themselves the question, oh, what's going to happen when I get out? Am I just going to keep doing this same old thing? Because it's just like when you're in jail and you don't have any other way out of that life, all you're going to do is be standing at the gate, standing in your greens, you're coming down off of the antipsychotic medications, you got no ID, no employment opportunities. Like there isn't enough programs for the guys actually in the prison. So if there was more education around education to what that gateway could create through lived experience conversations, I feel like that could be better.
And maybe having more people with lived experience being able
Yeah,
to be sharing that message.
yeah,
to other
definitely.
people in prison.
Yeah,
And I think the university, it's a no-brainer really for corrections. Like the university offers free healthcare. If you've got any psych needs, you can often get them access through the university. Emergency housing through the universities. Like the universities are actually like providing lots of services. I feel like corrections would be interested in anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a no-brainer in terms of accessing university.
yeah,
Like
definitely.
I get to go to the doctor for free.
Me too.
PhD student. It's like, don't have to pay the $80 to $110 to go and see a doctor.
And I think there's kind of this lived experience expertise that is fragility that you and I have talked about so much, that it's a fragile idea and you can't embed it with just kind of lived experience experts. You need this idea, which Emma, I'll hand over to you now, this idea of allyship. How can we do allyship, and how Emma, how can we do allyship?
That's what I said earlier. Thank you so much, just firstly to ACU, the law school, for having me, Dwayne, for inviting me and being my friend. It's an honour to be here, and I can't believe that it's a part of the thing that Bars is doing as well, because she's one of my heroines. So yeah, thank you for being here. You'll see in my title, so I want to do a couple of acknowledgements to start. So my title, An Action, Not an Identity, is something that I took from another one of my female heroes, Auntie Mundy, who runs Evolved Communities in Australia and is a First Nation elder here. And she wrote a piece on allyship in the context of wanting to be allies with First Nations Australians. And one of the first things she says in her piece is, please stop going around saying I'm an ally like it's an identity. Do something. And there's a very famous piece that went around the world from Roxane Gay from the United States, similarly saying, I don't need another ally. What are you going to do? And not that long ago, I was at a session by RMIT, the Centre for Innovative Justice there, where they had set up a centre for women who'd come out of prison to talk about their experience. And I had an experience panel, and I talked about their stuff, all the things, got to the end, question answer time, and someone asked a question around, very common question for the experience panels, what do you think that, needs to happen, and what would you do? And I wanted to stand up and applaud when this woman stood up and said, thanks for your question, but what are you going to do about it? And I was like, yes. And I thought to myself, Jesus, what are you going to do about it? Number one, I set up straight. I'm in trouble. What am I going to do? But also, my background comes in doing a lot of lived experience work in the health space, and for many years initially in the cancer space. And because I had cancer as a young adult, but I also happened to be a law student at the time. And I got to a point in doing that work where I'll turn around one day and I just kind of went, you know what? All the peeps, senior medicos, health policy professionals, health ministers, CEOs of hospitals, all the peeps. I was like, I'm getting a little tired of the fact that the people that are sick or have been sick are doing all the things, and now you're also asking them to fix your sugar system. So don't get me wrong, I have had essentially a career, you would say, in being a person that for a long time did cancer work, and I had a cancer history, and I wanted to be part and be in those conversations and all the things. But I also wanted to eat and pay rent and be also more than the cancer girl and all the things. And I remember a time when, there's Canteen is a very big advocacy group in Australia around young people who've been affected by cancer, for example. And I was just having these experiences where people with lived experience of cancer, which has enormous amounts of community empathy, not even the same universe as what people in the criminology space are dealing with. It's very socially endorsed, people are putting you up, and that's actually part of the problem, actually putting you up as inspiring, heroic people that you don't want to be. And you feel like you've a fat lot of nothing except got the benefits of access to healthcare, which, when I would talk to my US colleagues, for example, they'd be like, we're fighting to get people funding to get care and treatment to stay alive. Never mind all the nice supportive care stuff that goes around it, right? So, but anyway, in Australia, we're very lucky in that regard when it comes to things like cancer care. But what I noticed with young people that had cancer, they were just hanging out with other young people that had cancer, which is brilliant. Like peer support, do not get me wrong, I'm a big proponent of it, but I'm like, you can't only hang out with other people who've had cancer. Like that is not a thing. Like for people in terms of how they want to be and reconnect with who they are, who they always were, and be fully human, and just don't be one experience that they happen to have had, although they get brilliant stuff, their learning exchange and peer support. They actually want to be in a world where you can actually, like I as a young person couldn't even sit on the beach with my friends. I was like, actually, the Cancer Council would have loved me because I was a public health announcement where people would be going, quick, put your sunscreen on, quick, don't smoke, or whatever. I was like, I wasn't even opening my mouth. But my mere presence as a person who'd had cancer was a kind of some kind of health policing thing that went on for people around that. And I was like, oh my God, this is a very powerful thing. I still remember being in the lift of a law school. I went to the University of New South Wales, funnily enough in the same start year as Lorana, worlds colliding. I remember being I remember the lift door opening to go out, and I remember seeing someone and they were saying to me, oh, how are you going? And I just had a diagnosis of cancer, and I thought, what do I do right now? Like, do I say, got cancer, actually, see ya? Like, but I remember the responsibility I felt for the weight of putting that on someone else that they then have to walk away with. And what it felt like to go, is that ethically irresponsible? Is that a thing? Like, I don't even know what that means. I just know it's a very powerful thing that I now wield with a story that I need to kind of think about when I navigate my way in the world. That is a thing that I wasn't thinking about. And cancer, I guess, a bit like life-changing or identity-changing experiences, is one of those things that you measure your life before that, after that, which I hear a lot from people who've been incarcerated as well. So I tell you all that by way of context because it was my pathway in, I guess, to thinking about both the desire to act but also the responsibility it is to be a person with a lived experience of something. And for me, that is a question that goes back to what Baz was talking about earlier, which is what kind of society do you want to live in? And I know that might sound like a long bow, although Baz made it beautifully not sound like a long bow. But maybe because I was sick whilst I was going to and fro a law school, so I had notions and ideas around me and I was like, health is a social justice issue. And nowadays, when I still do work in the lived experience space in health, and I say to people, health is a social justice issue, I still get on. I'm like, so for me, lived experience work is about health and social equity. That voice. It's a rights issue. It's not a thing that is to be taken out for me in that context. So even though in Australia we lack a human rights culture, a notion of talking about my right to this or a constitutional right to that, we don't have that stuff. But it's about creating a language that says, I want to live in a place where people have a right to a say about the systems and the decisions that are made that impact their lives. And that makes lived experience voice in whatever space you're working in a justice issue, in my opinion. So I'll keep moving, but what I also wanted to pick up on from the brilliant panel discussion earlier and also what Jacob said is the question it seems that he still is asking and exploring is, well, what am I going to do about it? Well, you know what? I'm going to start my own law firm. Please let me know. I'm in. You know, like, and that person that I said to you that asked that question and a thing that made everyone go, ooh, when she said, what are you going to do about it? Instead of answering the question about what she was going to do about it, I was like, I just didn't forget that. I was like, and in a couple of years since I've been working on it, and thank you, Dwayne, for asking me to talk about this. I offer it as reflections. I don't have all this figured out, none of the things. This is a thing that I'm working through, but thank you for indulging me and letting me say my stuff out loud to you.
Right.
That one? Other way. Thank you. Right one.
There you go.
The other acknowledgement include, in addition to Auntie Mundi, and if there are any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this audience today, I pay my respects to you and to the land that we are on. I also do lived experience acknowledgements in the work that I do. And today I want to do a particular kind of one that's a bit different, but I think appropriate. The picture on the top left is the sign at Tarrangale Prison. Another one of those experiences you can't unhave, where when I was working with Dwayne, I got the very fortunate opportunity to go into there and do sounds very researchy, focus group with women as part of the Beyond Stone Walls, so a similar program, in and out of university program. And I want to shout out to those women that met with me and anyone else and any other women that are in prison right now or have been in prison, like the one sitting right next to me. And I don't want it just to be about that sign there at the prison they're in, because the picture on the right is about the fact that when I went there, they were also having a bit of a celebration that day because it was a moment in time for their program. And they were like so excited to give me Tim Tams. And for the non-Australians in the audience, that is the rock star of biscuits in this country. And I'm sure if you're in prison, it's not easily
Expensive.
right? And what I remember thinking was, Emma, please, they were desperate for me to eat not one but multiple. I can buy Tim Tams any time I like. You eat the Tim Tams. But what it made me feel was so welcome. And that's one of the things I want to highlight in my acknowledgement. I've done lived experience work in the health and human services space since I was 21. I'm now 50. It is the Hunger Games a lot of the time in terms of lived experience practice, politics. People are kind of, and they're incentivized to go up against each other about how do you get funded, how do you survive. They're incentivized to compete, just like university researchers are, right? They're not incentivized to collaborate. But nowhere have I received so much kindness and welcome and generosity for me to fumble my way through spaces that I don't understand about being in prison and experiences that I don't understand of trauma that I haven't had, I don't have a way into, as I have been in the lived experience criminology space. Not once has anyone ever said to me, oh, for God's sake, Emma, like, you're an idiot or shut up or whatever, right? I've experienced also in many spaces a kind of a anti-intellectual, anti-university, you use smart words like you're not welcome here kind of thing. Not once have I ever experienced that talking with people with incarceration experiences. They just welcome me. And the thing that I also took from that, I took many things. But the thing that I don't forget that was said to me by one woman as the course of the conversation was occurring, she just turned to me towards the end and she said, you know what, Emma, I used to be someone. And I just turned to her and I just went, you are someone, you still are someone. And what I felt more than anything from those women is they couldn't believe that I drove my ass 2 hours or whatever to get there and hang out with them. It was like some whatever. And I was like, I could do that all the time if anyone would let me in this joint. It was hard enough to get in there, but you know, like it just struck me and these women talking about themselves as if they were nothing. And once you hear that, you can't unhear that. Hopefully you all know about Justice Reform Initiative, but these are many, including Jacob's. Like there's so many. These are my teachers, right? So I've learned more about how to think about lack of voice, lack of power, where is there any kind of light in darkness? What as humans do we still have inside us to go, no, this can be different and my life can be different, that I have in this space. It is my honour to learn from people who, and these are just a few, there are so many, so I want to honour them in that. So what is lived experience? As I said, I wanted to highlight, and I've taken this for, let's go with the best of the USA right now, because we're having some challenges. And I really want to use this opportunity, because it happens to be this week, to go, I believe in what the best of what the United States has always stood for. And some of the best stuff that helps me in my work comes out of the United States. So I'm happy this week to have the opportunity to highlight one of them, which is what I find in lived experience work in the US is that compared to Australia, it's really well advanced, but much further advanced in terms of thinking about this as a public health issue, as a wide rights social issue, thinking about intersectionality and all the complexities of systemic racism, sexism, all of that stuff, about how that overlays this whole world. And if you try to do lived experience in a bubble outside that, to me, I'm going to say something quite strong now, but this sort of puts me in the mood, you guys, put me in the mood for this. It's a waste of time. If you're not going to consider systemic racism, sexism, all of the isms, classism, it's a waste of time. So for me, the US scholars, of course, Buzz included, are so helpful in what they offer us in that regard. And there are many definitions. I'm not arguing that you should not have one, this one, whatever. This just happens to be one that I use. And I want to highlight the end of it, because one of the debates that comes up very often in the spaces that I work in is what is lived experience expertise and how does it relate to professional and educational experience? And what I observe with people with experience, but specifically in the criminology space as not being that person, as an outside person, is we really, really want you to, we're keen on a notion of education. We'd particularly like you to get educated enough to be nice and palatable to sit on our panel and be our guest speaker. And if you could look quite nice, that'd be good too. Don't say fuck and don't whatever. But when you get a little bit too smart, that's a bit of a problem. And people will also kick you out of the lived experience world. I've had this experience myself. Like, oh, well, you're not one of us anymore. You've got a PhD, you've got a whatever. You're one of them. You're part of the system. So we'll punish you for the very thing that we encouraged you to get. So I really liked what Buzz spoke to earlier about the fact that, yes, people with lived experience are well aware that in a sense they're part of the very system that they're having a go at, are criticising. Yep. Have to be. You've got to work in the system still. Otherwise shit doesn't change. That's the same in health and human services as well as that. So I want to highlight the fact that people can have professional educational experience as part of their thing. Their lived experience still has a transcendent aspect to that. So that people with very little formal education, professional experience whatsoever, say some of the smartest stuff you will ever hear about justice reform, right? So it's not dependent on that, but I don't think you should then, when people go down those pathways, go, now you're out of the lived experience club. If you want to know what lived experience is in criminology, don't ask me, ask these peeps. And, you know, this is an aspect of allyship to me, is like, if you've got a platform, how I do, for however small it is, I'm going to use it to go, read this, look over here, and look for how people themselves are defining what lived experience is and should look like in the criminology space. I already started with actually a bit of my why about why do I do this, and there's a bit about my business if you're interested. But what I really want to say about this is, first of all, if there are particularly mothers or parents in the room seem to get upset if I don't say, and I'm okay now and my cancer didn't return and I'm healthy. So I always forget to say that. But I assume you can see. I always forget to go, I was okay and I'm still okay. But I think you can see I'm okay. But yes, parents tend to get very upset about that. But yeah, what I really want to say about this is, where I start with people with lived experience who might be going, what do I do? And do I need to study this? And do I become a peer support person? And what does the qualifications for that mean? What all the things? What's your why? And the why is a connector for everyone. We heard whys of all the different, I'm sure you've all got whys right now in this audience, no matter where you come from. And for me, I always find it helpful. And when I'm working with systems and people that it's difficult and gets and the thing that Buzz beautifully talked about like you're just sitting in tension all the time because you're working with the very people you're criticising, is what's their why, right? So in the health space, when I get caught up with professors of medicine and all the people going to me, all the things, I'd be like, tell me about your patients, why are you a doctor? And the stuff would come out, right? And people's full humanity would turn. Because one of the things that I guess I want to put out there I think is a misnomer, is that one of the ways that lived experience knowledge gets minimised or marginalised is that it's personal. We don't do personal, especially when I do it in law. Like, I have had to retrain myself to use the word I in point of view. Like, I learned to write in the third person the world's longest sentences. You have to retrain yourself out of that. And so what I always say about my stuff is the personal is professional, the professional is personal, the personal is also political, small p political. The political is also personal. And is for everyone. Because do not tell me where you turn up and spend hours of your time every week and years of your life is not personal to you and your work. So let's try and remember that, people who are prepared to put their stories on the outside and go, I'm here because I've had this personal experience, their work is personal in a much more obvious and explicit way. Everybody's work is personal, right? Which doesn't mean that some people aren't just doing it so they can eat, they can survive. The notion, in many ways, including myself, being able to be a lived experience advocate is very privileged existence, right? I learnt very quickly that I got to sit in tables and talk about cancer because I had a supportive family. I had access to the medical care that saved my life. I was doing law, so people thought, oh, she might be all right. She's almost one of us. We'll do medicine, law, that might be good enough. I was middle class. I looked a certain way, right? So just all of that, it's a privileged space. And that's about the responsibility then for me to go, okay, well, I've got that privilege. What am I going to do with it? So again, I'm not an expert in how to be an ally. And who are people who really know about this stuff in a country like Australia? Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They're in the business of thinking about it. Again, small numbers. We did a very good job in Australia of trying to eliminate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So the percentage population left, thanks to colonialism, is very small. But again, we're potentially talking about a small numbers issue for people with lived experience of incarceration as well. And if you want to learn about how to be relational, if you want to learn about how never to give up, in spite of the fact that all the structural stuff is working against you, and the whole country, like our voice referendum, seems to be telling you we don't actually want to listen to you, and you keep going, if you want to learn about that, go to First Nations people in Australia. So I used here an adapted thing from Summer on how to be a good ally that I think is really quite useful though. So preferencing lived experience voices, I've talked a bit about that already. You've seen that on display here today. Really important. If someone asked me about talking about whatever, I'd be saying, why don't you call up? Mind you, if these guys get any more requests to speak, they might they might combust. But yes, you know what I'm saying. be okay with not always being part of it. You wouldn't be able to tell from the way that I'm gabbing on that I have any capacity to sharp and listen to other people, but hopefully I do. So sometimes it's not your conversation to have, not your story to tell. Be there for the good times and the bad. I learned with my friendship and relationship with Dwayne that shitty stuff happens in this space sometimes. So you can't just be there when it's like, oh, Dwayne's a rock star, he was so great at this thing and the organisation's thrilled with him, because when they're screwing him around with HR and drilling him on his criminal record and can't figure out how to pay him and offering him no supervision and support, whatever, you've got to be there for that as well. Say something when you hear someone say inappropriate thing. So I still remember the feeling Dwayne and I started at the same time as we were doing all the office rounds, meet this person in 500 rooms in general social services. And I just remember thinking, I'm nervous going, I'm new and, are people going to like me and is it going to be okay? Is this job going to be okay? And I thought to myself, Dwayne knows he's walking into every room and every person in that room knows that he's in a lived experience role and he's been in prison. I just even the thought of that, I was like, and yet he still did it with the charm and the office was boring after you left. The charm and the entertainment or whatever, right? But nonetheless, that wasn't the point. It wasn't the point about him being able to manage that situation with humour and grace and courage. It was about, well, what are we doing in the spaces? So you can actually be in that room. And actually, it's none of anyone's goddamn business what any of the things. I won't get on that soapbox, but you know what I'm saying. But it's also being bound and prepared up for something. And I actually apologised to Dwayne after that job because I tried to a certain extent. But if I had my time again, I would say a lot more to stand up for him because it needed saying, and it needed saying not just by him, where things needed to be pushed back on him. This one is a really important one, right? Like if people go, yeah, nah, that's bullshit, you can't take it personally, which is really hard. I'm not saying I've got that all figured out or I'm really good, at that, because it's hard, right? But yes, really important to think about that. Can't do this stuff alone. These guys can't do it alone. If you want to we've got to grow the people, right? I love the Buzz use of the word movement, right? If you think about it like that, like it's got to grow the people. And also don't make assumptions that everybody is the same, right? And we do this in lived experience places across the board, but including in incarceration spaces. Like, look at what people have got in common, of course, because they've got things in common to say, but they've also got lives and contexts and they're individuals, and context is everything in many ways in figuring out how to be a helpful ally to them. And I just want to finish off what I've said by saying two things. One is, I'm not wanting to give an impression that I've got this all figured out. I'm just sharing some reflections with you. It's a constant learning process. And First Nations people I've worked with often said to me, Emma, don't worry about it. You'll be learning about it your whole life. We're still learning about what it means to be Aboriginal. So just get over it. Don't worry. So I'm trying to lean into a notion that I'm going to be clumsy and do things and not get it right or whatever, and just somehow kind of keep going. But also, and this is a place we started earlier in the panel today, it starts on the inside. There is no doubt that when I went to work with Dwayne, I had to go to myself, am I interested in what Dwayne did? Would I Google him? What would I think about that? If I found out Dwayne did this thing or that thing, am I going to think differently about him? I had to challenge myself to go, okay, Emma, you like him, you're friendly with him or whatever, but you have the same internalized biases, assumptions, things, whatever, as everybody else. And you have to ask yourself the question, how do you feel about it? How are you going to navigate that? How are you going to, where's your lines? What are you prepared to stand up for? The things you're not. I mean, there are people still now when I support these guys on LinkedIn that go, what are you doing publicly supporting the criminals? So which is much easier now to do when I work for myself, but when I work for other people it was less easy. Yeah. So I guess I want to just kind of just say that, I just want to sort of say I don't have it all figured out or anything like that. And I don't want to give that impression. I'm just offering reflections, but also to say I really realised in the privilege it was to work with Dwayne, and then we became mates and we're still mates, yay. Was I realised I was like, no, this is about you, Emma. Like you actually have to go, who do I want to be? What kind of community do I want to live in? What is my role in that? What are the biases that I have? Am I doing whatever? Am I participating? And how's that going to be? And that's where I think I've become better at what I do, and I hope maybe a better kind of a human in a way, as a result of that. And speaking of uplifting human experiences, I'll end on the note, this is a picture of Bangarra Dance Company, one of Australia's finest cultural assets. If you've never had the privilege of going to Bangarra, every Australian should see at least one Bangarra performance in their life. If you're from overseas and you ever got the opportunity, absolutely. It is the epitome of what does justice look like through the arts, through storytelling, through physical movement, through the wisdom of generations and generations culture. And you'll see the pictures here that you see so much stuff from these guys around collective work, interdependency. They're not afraid of interdependency. It's not some dirty word because we must be autonomous. They understand working collectively to produce their shows, the collective impact of their shows and on the audiences. They also understand, which you'll see from the name of the performance here, the light inside. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thanks very much, Emma. I think that was really kind of this idea of allyship is really important for both kind of this lived experience conversation that we've had, but also around education. If we want to promote education in prisons and places of punishment, then we can't do it alone. Those with lived experience, those that work in the space, those that are academics, the activists, but rather we need the help of everybody. I think this idea of allyship is really relevant and something that we should think about and reflect. But if I could now ask, and thank you, to Tina and to Jacob again for the wonderful.
Thank you.
We're now going to watch the Education Not Incarceration docu-series that's been produced and created by the Incarceration Nations Network. So if I could ask for you to turn your chairs around to a screen, so your neck isn't to be in pain, and wouldn't want to go downstairs as well. And we'll watch this, and afterwards we'll have dance and drinks and so forth for you guys.
Well, I've been in prison since I was 16. I'm 34 now.
Providing prisoners with college opportunities is now a popular idea.